Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Baroud, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Melissa Pegus, Managing Director of Techstars Atlanta, a startup operator, and an early stage investor. During her tenure as a startup operator, she has spent more than a decade scaling startups.
I'm the managing director for Techstars Atlanta, powered by JP Morgan. And through the accelerator, I invest in founders who are building the future of commerce technology, consumer brands and platform, and the creator economy.
Great. Okay, so you have some great experience. You've been through startups in your past. Tell us about your entrepreneurial journey, and why don't we start in college or before then, wherever you want to start, so we can get a sense for your path.
Absolutely. So, my first exposure to entrepreneurship and what it means to be an entrepreneur was actually watching my grandfather run his cocoa farming business in Trinidad. And so, very often when we think about the archetype of an entrepreneur, we think of a high-tech CEO. But for me, it was actually, a farmer in my family. And I think what was really special and unique about his journey is that he made the switch from subsistence farming to large scale exportation, but on that journey. And I think that's where I get the notion of being so passionate about being a rising tide. For him, it wasn't enough to have this personal achievement. He always really wanted to bring his community along with him and constantly reinvested in his people and in his community, and the town that he lived in, which I think is something that I aspire to do, is to similarly be a rising tide in my community.
Nice. And then from there, college.
Yeah, so from there, I had an awesome experience at Georgetown University. Go Hoyas! And when I graduated, and that's where I got my start in the world of technology. It was actually really interesting. The first company, Frontier Strategy Group, they were a boutique consulting firm that wanted to be a SaaS company. And so I got that firsthand experience of doing the product development to transform us from being a consulting shop to a data and analytics BI firm. And I figured out that product and innovation was really about running some tests and breaking things, figuring out where you were right, retrenching where you were wrong. And for me, the secret sauce has always been just keeping a close ear to the market and constant customer validation. So, I've done everything from building product to leading strategy, corporate development, partnerships, leading an entire revenue organization. And while my experience has largely been concentrated in the commerce tech space, I've worked with 9 startups now, as an operator across the various alphabet of institutional funding. And in that time, I've been through about 7 exits to date, which has been great. But what I've taken away from that, in addition to some of those successes as well, is the areas where we stalled and we stumbled, and how we retrenched and came together as a team and did better and ultimately had a successful exit. And I apply those learnings to the work I do with founders today to help maybe shortcut some of the mistakes that they'll run into and help to provide them ease on their founder's journey.
Oh, that's great. That is a lot of experience. So, and obviously Techstars has a lot of founders that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about Techstars in general for the person that doesn't know all the details about this amazing accelerator. Tell us what it is, how big it is, when it started.
So, Techstars is a global accelerator. One of our fundamental premises, I mean, our values of give first are all things that I really identify with, but one of our fundamental premises, and something that I also hold near and dear, is that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so, through the accelerator, what we aim to do is to really democratize access to entrepreneurship and to help entrepreneurs succeed, help them bring their vision of a better world to life. We've been around for close to, I would say, maybe a little more than a decade, close to a decade now, and our reach is global. We operate accelerators all over the world, nearly on every continent, and have a tremendous network of founders, alumni, and investors. Typically, we're working with founders at the earliest stages, some pre-product at concept stage, some early stage. Typically, they're pre-seed or seed round founders. And where we're really aiming to lean in and help them is with things like achieving product market fit, scaling their go-to-market, and as always, preparing to run a successful fundraising process. And while I think our programming is bar none and awesome, it would be a lie if I said I think our programming is really the most important part of the accelerator. Like, if you did enough research, you could find content on the same topics online. You could watch videos on YouTube. I think the magic of what we do is truly the network. For every founder that's gone through program, I tell them this at the beginning of program, and at some point they've heard it back to me through their own experiences, that this very often is one of the only and few times in life that they are surrounded by a community that wants nothing more than their success. So our investors who not only are excited about what they're building and want to lean in, but also want to help guide them on that fundraising journey, mentors who are operators who have done this before, or subject matter experts who can help them further their ideas to the teams. I'm one of a variety of managing directors that we have. And I'd say every one of my colleagues is just incredible and gifted and talented in their own way. And so we really think that we create a bit of magic for our founders. And if you look at our long-term goals, it's really to help spin that flywheel of entrepreneurship even faster. So what we see from our alumni as they grow in scale and they have exits and liquidity events, they become that next round of angel or early stage investors for founders. And our founders are all very diverse. And now we have a more diverse investor base, which by virtue of that, we start to not only increase the size and scale of what's possible for entrepreneurs through the added resource and funding, but also truly diversify what it means to be an entrepreneur, which is a great thing.
Wow. And what about numbers? How many startups have gone through since inception? Any idea about that number?
How many startups have gone through Techstars? We're at over. I know we have over 19 unicorns, over 7,000 mentors. I want to say we've graduated over 3,000 startups to date.
Wow, that's huge. Then you're one of the biggest accelerators on the planet, then, I think, right? If not the biggest.
I think we might be. I don't have all the data to confirm, but we are definitely a big player in the early stage startup space.
Got it. And so when when the startup comes in, you invest money and you take equity. How does that work?
Yeah, we invest money, we take equity. Our accelerators are diverse in terms of focus, thesis, location. What is standard is the Techstars investment Techstars deal. So we take equity in exchange for common stock, and they also have an optional convertible note, and they all go through a 13-week program. At the end point of which we sort of unveil the startups to our network with all the progress that they've made, and then they're sort of off to the races. And of course, they're part of the network for life.
Got it. And so historically it was in person, but over the past few years it's moved to virtual. Even before the pandemic, what's the sort of in-person hybrid, or how do you guys operate?
So our accelerators operate in a variety of formats to make sure that there's always an accelerator that can rise to meet the need of the founders. So specifically Techstars Atlanta, powered by JP Morgan, we run in a hybrid virtual first format, which means that the balance of the content across the 13 weeks is run virtually. This allows founders to work in the time and space that's most convenient for them and their teams. And quite frankly, I think it's just the most equitable and accessible way for us to run the format. But we punctuate the experience with in-person experiences for our founders. So we always start our program with a founders retreat. For this current program, we launched our retreat in Cancun. For our upcoming program, our retreat will be in Phuket in Thailand, which we're really excited about. And then we expose our founders to a variety of industry and investor events. And then we always have a virtual and an in-person demo day. And so all of these things are in service of helping our founders better connect to the community, connect with investors, and connect with each other as well. So we're really excited about the dynamic experience that we're creating for our founders.
Wow. And what separates Techstars from all the other accelerators?
I just think we're the best at what we do. But I mean, honestly, I have founders all the time who ask me, why should I do this accelerator? And I tell them, as a founder, you have a responsibility to yourself, to your employees, and to your investors to do your research and make sure that you are making the best decisions on behalf of the business. So it's not my job to convince you why you should do the accelerator. And we certainly don't need to. We're heavily subscribed to by startups all over the world, but rather I always tell them to really be clear on what they're hoping to get out of that experience. So for me, I invest in founders who are building within a specific thesis area. And the two things that we help them with is go-to-market acceleration and preparing to run a successful fundraising process. So if they're building in our core areas and those are the things that they're looking to achieve, then bar none, I think we are the best accelerator for startups in this space. We are incredibly relevant to the founders. We just have better network, investor, and connections in the specific areas that we're building in than anyone else.
Got it. And so if there was one thing founders should consider when picking an accelerator, what would that be?
When I joined Techstars and I talked to my peers who'd been doing this a bit longer than I have, they said something that was really interesting, and I do think it's true. Founders really choose the managing director, right? So we have a focus, a format in which we run it, their aims of the program. But at the end of the day, startups, entrepreneurship, business, you're really in the business of people. And so when you find an accelerator you want to work with, there's a managing director that's going to lead that program, and you have to make sure that you and them are aligned on your KPIs and what you're hoping to achieve. So I always say, do your research, read their thesis. You know, most of us have a footprint online where we talk about what we're interested in, the types of business ideas that we're interested in investing in, and getting that face time with the managing director through office hours or other open events. I always say that's really important to make sure that this is someone that you really believe in building that partnership with. You're going to lean in and work closely for 13 weeks and beyond.
Got it. Okay.
And I know it seems like a common sense thing, but I can't tell you how many founders reach out and they're like, hey, would my startup be a good fit for your accelerator? And I'm like, well, did you read the program page? Did you read the thesis? Like, research is so important. You are the founder of your business. Like, you have to make sure that you are making the best decisions for your business. And there's a lot of that work that's just like the elbow grease you've got to put in to do the research on your own.
Got it. And it's an important reminder, right? So the market in general, right? We've obviously some ups and downs. How have things gone over the past year or so, and how are things going now? And what's the situation out there for entrepreneurs?
So I don't know that I'm going to offer any gems that we're not already hearing or people aren't already tweeting. Yes, the markets are cooling a bit. We saw really frothy valuations. Now we're seeing more conservative valuations. We're seeing more rigid milestones being required as you fundraise at certain stages. What I will say, though, is that founders who are building businesses for the long term, things shouldn't change much for them, right? If you're not building for the hype cycle, if you're building along an enduring business, then this should not be new news to you. You know that you need to have a solid business and a solid business model in order for investors to understand and feel the confidence in you and what you're building to want to lean in and invest. I would also say that for founders from underrepresented backgrounds, the markets have always required them to be held to a higher standard of performance. So this should not change for them at all. What is very important for founders to know is to really understand your business fundamentals and your financial models, understand your burn rate and your runway. And we're always encouraging founders to extend their runway, but at the very least to make sure that they're doing scenario planning based on as market conditions improve or deteriorate, that they know what those key signals are for their business such that they can react in a way that is going to ultimately set them up to succeed in the long term.
Got it. Okay.
And so I think, and so I would say is if before, it'd be the last 12 to 18 months, businesses were focused purely on growth. Now it's a balance between growth and survival.
Got it. And so they have to tighten up their businesses, have to get their act together, right? And then if they're still raising, they're going to have to get their pitches to be perfect, right? And that's something that you can't overstate, right?
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely. So when I talk to founders about their pitches, um, first and foremost, it's clarity of the pitch. And I know everyone's heard that pithy quote. It's like, I'm sorry, I wrote you a long email. I didn't have the time to write a short one. Like really refining your messaging and making crystal clear what is the problem that you're solving? Who are you solving it for? How are you solving that problem? And importantly, especially when you're pitching to investors, how are you going to make money? Um, when you are building your business every day and you're close to the customers and your product, sometimes it's easy to take for granted things that are not said. You're like, I just get it. I intuitively know what I'm building. You need to be able to bring investors and advisors and mentors along for the journey. So, clarity of your pitch. I always say, go and pitch people outside of your industry. Go and pitch your family members who might not be as close to the problem you're solving as you are. And then gauge for their understanding of what you've said. Or your pitch should be so crystal clear that the layman should understand what you're doing and the problem that you're solving and how you're providing value for your end customer.
right, great. So, if we were to pull out one thing, just one thing about getting the pitch right, what's the
Mhm.
most important thing?
The most important thing for me is understanding who your customer is. You wouldn't believe the number of times I talk to founders and they'll tell me the industry that they are solving for. And again, your customer is the individual who is buying that product or service from you, whether it's an individual consumer or an individual within an organization who has budget for that. And I always have to press founders on who is your customer, because then the next questions that I need to ask you as I do my due diligence, right, is like, how do you acquire those customers? How do they pay for your product? How do they learn about your product? How do they share that product with their community such that you can drive referrals and other organic growth? And so clarity on your customer persona is so important.
Great. Now, let's talk about talent, right?
Hmm.
So, you know as well as anyone how important talent is to the team, to the startup, to the success or potential for success, right? Obviously, we've
Hmm.
been going through some tough times right now. There's more talent on the market, which is, I think, a positive for startups who typically are over, or the talent is overpriced and they can't afford it. So, talk about that and how you see things moving forward for, or what advice you would give founders who need to, build their teams.
Absolutely. I would tell founders that before you hit product market fit, be very lean on your hiring, because what you don't want to do is put too many layers between you and your customer when you're really trying to figure out those scalable, repeatable motions and you've achieved product market fit. Once you've nailed those, it's easy to bring people along for the ride, and you can give them sort of a playbook or the starting points of a process that works and ask them to replicate it. The other things that we tell founders when it comes to hiring their teams is to take the same care in hiring team members as you would with investors or advisors. They are going to be building your business with you. They're going to be talking to your customers as well. And so that same rigor that you would take to fundraising, take that same approach to hiring. And then also, again, it's true that talent is equally distributed, and I think in the post pandemic era, if you will, it's allowed us to really broaden our thinking about where we hire and how we hire, and I think that's a really great thing. It gives us a great opportunity more than ever to bring in diversity of perspectives as well, now that it is sort of the norm for us to have distributed teams. And the other thing is to always help your end customers understand exactly what is the vision that you have for your customers and bring them along for that journey with you. If they don't know what your end goal is, what you're trying to achieve, if they don't understand your customer as well as you do, you're really setting them up as a disadvantage as it relates to them driving innovation within your organization and taking care of your customers and seeking out opportunities in the same way that you would. And the last bit of advice that I give to startup founders, really anyone that's hiring any employee, is make sure you're always hiring someone that's better at you than something. That's the way you get a 10x team. And I think sometimes it takes a little setting aside of ego to hire someone who truly excels in an area that might be your weakness, but that for me has been the common marker of great leaders and truly great teams.
That is great advice. Now, you've obviously seen a lot of talent come and go,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And probably had to fire people in the past. Tell us one story that sort of you recall vividly about, whether it was a good or bad or something went awry, and how things ended up.
Absolutely. So first as a leader, it's really important to say that hiring people is more about hiring people for a job that you need done. As a leader, you are now responsible for someone's career, for their livelihood, for especially in the era of remote work, when you manage remote teams, they are literally inviting you into their homes, into their lives, and that is a great deal of responsibility and care should be taken. And I think everyone should always be trying to improve their leadership muscle, right? This uh, to be a leader requires the same training it would take if you wanted to advance as a mathematician or a physician or something else. I also fundamentally believe that everyone wants to do a good job. We feel joy and we feel pride when we show up and do our best. And so, as leaders, it is our job to provide our teams with the right environments, tools, and resources for them to thrive. And when something is not working, then you should really be tough on process, but not on people. People always need to work from a place of safety and situatedness and feeling significant in order to excel. And so it's very often that maybe there's something with process or training that's broken. And taking the time to really lean into that empathy and understand how you develop your people, because that's how you retain people for the long term. It's also possible that you'll have people join the team that aren't a good fit, or maybe they're doing a job that just truly isn't aligned with what their goals are, or even maybe they're trying something new and it's just not the type of role that ultimately is going to make them happy and bring them fulfillment. And that's okay. You should still respect those people on those journey and find the, I would say, the best and most diplomatic way to exit those relationships in the same way that you entered. What I do know from my time spent at various startups and working with tons of founders is that it truly is a small world. And I encourage everyone to think about that when you are in a position of power and dealing with someone who perhaps isn't performing. There's always a kind and diplomatic way to end relationships. And, um, you know, it is a virtuous cycle. I think it brings a lot of goodwill back to you and your organization. Every person that encounters you and your startup ultimately ends up being, I would say, an advocate that's either going to work on your behalf or work against you and talk about what a negative experience they had.
That's really insightful. And what about picking founders, right? That's always a dilemma, right? That's such an important role or decision, right? And
Mhm.
it could be great, and it could, go downhill, just like any
Mhm.
relationship. So talk to us
Mhm.
about uh, your insights about that.
About picking founders for program or
Picking a
founders for
co-founder
picking a
or,
co-founder. So I have tons of founders who reach out to me who are interested in the accelerator and they're like, I'm a solo founder. Do I need a co-founder to get into the program? Absolutely not. And anyone who tells you that is absolutely just not thinking about these things in the right way and potentially setting founders up to make some really terrible decisions. The co-founder that you choose for your startup is a very important decision. I'm going to say it's right up there with the person that you marry, mostly because getting out of those relationships are equally as painful. And when I talk to founders, for me, it's not so much about whether you have a co-founder. I'm interested in what the team looks like. And what does your founding team look like? Who are the people that you will recruit or that you will recruit and who will work with you to bring this product or service to life and to ultimately serve your customers? And as you're picking co-founders, there's a difference between a co-founder who is going to work shoulder to shoulder with you and put in that same time and effort versus someone who's like, I'm truly skilled in this area and I'm going to be a great team member, but I'm not going to be a co-founder. Vesting is so important. Vesting are one of the things that we set up for the company that I think often protects us from ourselves. You might meet someone and think they're wonderful, and when and if it doesn't work out, vesting is what saves you from having that person leave the organization with a ton of equity that you actually need to reallocate to people who will be with you on that journey for the long term. So vesting, truly understanding if you need a member of your founding team or a co-founder, not making hasty co-founder recruiting decisions because you think having a co-founder is in vogue or is going to allow you to be more successful than someone without one.
And when you say vesting, for those folks who don't know what that means, can you explain that?
Absolutely. So when you grant someone equity in your business, this is a share of your business that you're giving to them, right? Whether it's 1% or 4%, you want to make sure that there is a period of vesting. And what that means, it's a period of time or milestones that they meet at which that equity that you've given them firmly becomes theirs. And if someone doesn't hit those vesting milestones, then that is a trigger for the company to be able to retain that equity and protect itself.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so
and one other plug, because I know that there are so many terms and just strategies that I think we take for granted that may not be super clear for founders. So there are two resources I always love to highlight. First and foremost, reading the Venture Deals book. It helps you prepare for really understanding the nuances and the ins and out of startup fundraising, and allows you to speak the same language as your investors, and more information allows you to better advocate for yourself and your business. And then NVCA, which is the National Venture Capital Association. They are so great at publishing reports and templated documents, and they're just such a wonderful resource that is also free and accessible to everyone. So that way, if you're getting term sheets, if you're reading clauses, if you're getting feedback that you're wondering, is this standard or is this something I should be negotiating? There's so many different places that you can turn to for information to broaden your founder experience and learn from others.
Got it. That's great advice. Now, what about some of the things you're seeing in startup founders? Are there certain things that are concerning you, certain gaps, certain sort of blind spots that are sort of becoming more prevalent, or is the talent base generally getting better and that's a great thing? What are you seeing regarding that?
Every time I talk to a new group of founders, I will say that founders in general are just a wonderful group of people, right? There's no monolith on what it means to be a founder, but there is truly something special about a person who decides that I am so committed to and passionate about solving this problem that I am now going to dedicate my life's work to doing that. And what's more, I'm going to be brave enough to create an organization that does this and bring others along on the journey. And so overall, I think as we start to diversify what it means to be an entrepreneur, as we highlight the stories of entrepreneurs, we see the founder base become more diverse. We see people building all sorts of interesting businesses. I think, and through sharing their experiences with one another, they help each other sort of start at a higher level each cycle we go through. One of the things that I always encourage founders is, you'll get lots of advice on your journey, especially as I would say that FOMO of not being a founder becomes more broad, right? Most people want to be a founder entrepreneur, which is great. You'll get lots of advice. It's important what advice you take. Ultimately, as a founder, you have to know what is best for your business, for yourself, and for your customers. And there are tons of experts that pop up everywhere. And so I think it's really having that confidence in yourself to be able to sort of cut through all the feedback that you're getting.
That's really that's insightful, because they need to be open-minded, right? You need to suck in information. You can't just be sort of arrogant and think you know it all. Yeah,
Right.
you have to sort of be able to have some balance in what guidance you take and implement, and what you sort of put aside, right? Or get additional feedback from others, right? There's other things you can do if you're still pondering something, right?
Right.
Got it. Okay, so let's see the challenges and opportunities ahead for startups and founders. Are we seeing? We've spoken about this a little bit, but what's concerning you going forward, or are things looking relatively okay for people considering launching a business?
I'm still bullish on the opportunity for founders and for people launching startups. I will say, as we are going through a period of potentially economic contraction, I am optimistic, but I'm still keeping a close eye to the market, specifically on the early stage funding area. Firms are still deploying capital, but I believe that we will see a more conservative approach to investing, and perhaps we'll see a slight slowdown in deployment. That's a really good thing, though. I find that founders have more grit and determination than anyone else. And so raising venture is great, but growing through revenue is even better. And I think we'll start to see more of a focus on um, really maximizing growth through customer acquisition.
Got it. And what about for those, we spoke about this earlier about there's a lot of layoffs right now with in tech.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when people think about what's next, whether they look for a job, find a job, or take a break, or both, some are
Mm-hmm.
invariably, hopefully, going to think about starting a business,
Mm-hmm.
launching a new venture. And I'm sure people come to you all the time. Are there things you generally say to folks as they think about entrepreneurship?
I would say that these economic times are great for people who are thinking of making the leap of launching a business. Sometimes we make the decision to launch enterprises, and sometimes life has a way of sort of pushing us to that decision point through things that happen or may not happen, as you mentioned, the layoffs. And first, one of the things that we really highlight through program, and we have incredible banking partners with JP Morgan specifically. My banker in residence, Kalen Tapp, is someone that our founders get to work really closely with, and he's just an absolute gem of a human being. We talk to founders not only about their startup financing strategy, but also about their personal founder finances. And it's really important to make sure that those are two distinct things and that you do have a solid personal financial management base. We talk about the risk taking of entrepreneurship, and that's great, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And so we always talk to people about what it means to understand and make distinct your personal runway from your business's runway, understanding the different places that you can get funding, the different sort of funding and cash flow management strategies as well. And then also the way that you can approach going through that process of idea validation before you dive in, fully fledged to focusing on building something. And so customer discovery, if you're thinking about, hey, I'd like to launch a startup, but I'm not sure what I want to start or if there's a market for it. Customer discovery, sometimes we make the process more overblown and complicated than it needs to be. Talk to 10 potential customers. And also make sure that when you're launching your business, you're starting from a strong sort of like personal financial space as well, because you'll probably be stretched thin, and it'll be a little leaner than if you're employed full time and has someone who's paying you a stable salary. We often see founders have to prepare to make that leap.
Right. And alternatively, for folks who still have a job
Mm-hmm.
and are thinking about it, how do you view side hustles or working on something, potentially a new
People,
venture on the side?
People absolutely do it. I personally don't accept any founders into the accelerator that are not fully focused on their startup, just because the accelerator is very intensive. But side hustles are great. It's a great way to dip your toe into being an entrepreneur, to exploring a problem area. What I will say is be very mindful of the agreements that you sign with your employer. Very often, especially if you work in tech, you sign some sort of agreement when you start working for an employer that says that anything that you create during that time that you're employed by them, whether it's on the clock or not, is their IP. And so I think a good life bit of advice I give people is like, don't sign things that you don't understand, and be aware of the implications of all the contracts that you sign, but specifically in this area as well, because very often when we launch ventures, they're in areas that we have specific insights and skills. And so that is probably where we are employed as well.
That's great advice. What about as we look at the landscape globally? Obviously, Techstars is global. Are there certain
Mhm.
things that are going on around the world, hubs, or things that are exciting for you to watch as they develop? Because entrepreneurship is now worldwide, which is a wonderful thing. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious of how you see it.
Entrepreneurship is worldwide. I'm specifically passionate about the area of commerce tech because it is, I think, one of the most globalizing forces of our time. I'm very, very interested in how we continue to empower entrepreneurs that are coming from Latin American, Caribbean, uh, and giving them the tools and resources that they need to compete on the world stage with founders who come from what in the investing world we might call more tier one investment hubs as well. And so I'm really excited to see more local funding opportunities for these founders because we know that that is the prerequisite for the development of any entrepreneurial ecosystem. It has to start with funding. So for me, it's been very exciting to see the widespread proliferation of hyperlocal funds.
Got it. Well, that's really positive to hear that, and I think the best is yet to come, right? From as more people learn about
My glass is
entrepreneurship.
always half full. I mean, there's obviously tons of things going on in the world to be concerned with, but I too always agree the best is yet to come.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation, Melissa. I really appreciate you taking the time. We usually end with a saying, a poem, or something that's important to you. So, what would you like to share with us?
I would like to share a poem called The Man in the Arena. I think many founders have heard it, and if they haven't, I hope it gives them um, some solace or some feeling of support on their journey. Being a founder is hard, and you get a lot of advice, and sometimes things aren't always that supportive. And I always tell founders to remember that you're the one who's building, you're doing the hard thing. And so I'd like to share this with them. It's called The Man in the Arena, and it goes, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat."
Wonderful. What a great way to end, and so appropriate, for entrepreneurs and for our times, right? For all times. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.